Hello, and thank you for tuning in to learn more about the Milwaukee River Floodplains Cleanup and the Great Lakes Legacy Act program in the Milwaukee Estuary Area of Concern. My name is Brendan Dow, and I'm the Milwaukee Estuary Area Concern Coordinator for the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. This presentation was provided during an open house at Gordon Park Pavilion in Milwaukee on November 2nd, 2023, to share information with the public and to receive initial questions and feedback about upcoming work planned for the Milwaukee Estuary Area of Concern, and more specifically, a certain reach or area of the cleanup, the Milwaukee River Floodplains. Joining me today are a few other presenters. Heather Williams from EPA Great Lakes National Program Office to share information about the planned sediment remediation and floodplains cleanup. Natalie Dutek from Milwaukee County Parks to talk about the planned restoration work for the Milwaukee River Greenway. Amanda Coach from Wisconsin Department of Health Services to provide information about how activities in the floodplains may impact your health and what you can do to prevent exposure. And all of the presenters today are part of what is referred to as the Waterway Restoration Partnership. This partnership, which was formed in 2021, includes over 150 people and represents more than 20 environmental organizations, and of which have been working together for years to improve water quality and habitat in Milwaukee and the surrounding region, and wanted to make cleaning up the area of concern a priority. The Waterway Restoration Partnership has a website for people to visit, and to learn more information, you can visit it by going to www.mkewaterwaypartners.org. You can also sign up for monthly newsletters on the WRP website to get updates on all the work happening within the Milwaukee Estuary Area of Concern. In addition to signing up for monthly newsletters to learn more information, the draft feasibility study reports that go into much more detail about what is going to be shared in this presentation, as well as for the other project area reaches, can be found on the Waterway Restoration Partnership website by using the first link. There are also overview posters of the work planned in each of the floodplain areas available online by using the second link. Under each of the web pages, you are available to provide comments and to share your thoughts on the planned cleanup. Any comments or questions received from the public meetings, as well as through the web page, will be addressed in a frequently asked questions document and updated as needed. And so for the agenda today, each presenter is going to touch base on a number of topics that surround this work. I will be covering the Areas of Concern 101 portion of the agenda. Heather will be covering the sediment remediation basics and floodplains reach cleanup information. Amanda will be covering public health activities and how to safely recreate within the Milwaukee River floodplains. And finally, Natalie will be covering the habitat restoration work that is planned for the Milwaukee River Greenway. Okay, now to cover Areas of Concern 101. On your screen are 43 areas of concern, 26 in the United States, 17 in Canada, and 5 of which are shared between both countries. They were originally designated as areas of concerns in the 1987 Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement to address polluted hotspots and areas of significant environmental degradation issues. The state of Wisconsin has 5 areas of concern: the St. Louis River, Lower Menominee River, Lower Green Bay and Fox River, Sheboygan River, and the Milwaukee Estuary Area of Concern. The Lower Menominee River was the first area of concern within the state of Wisconsin to be delisted, and that was delisted in 2020. On the right is the boundary of the Milwaukee Estuary Area of Concern in yellow. It spans the Milwaukee River, the Menominee River and Little Menominee River, and the Kinnickinnic River, as well as the inner and outer harbor, as well as Milwaukee Bay. In blue are the watersheds for areas that drain to the area of concern. And so what is the funding mechanism to address a lot of these environmental degradation issues? Well, the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative was first launched in 2010 as a non-regulatory program that provides funding to address these goals and objectives in the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. And it really served as a catalyst to jumpstart removing area of concern impairments. It has 5 focus areas: toxic substances and areas of concern, invasive species, non-point source pollution impacts on nearshore health, habitat and species, and foundations for future restoration actions. Today, and more specifically for this work, we will be talking about Focus Area 1, Toxic Substances and Areas of Concern. So we talked a little bit about the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, and the program as part of the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative that is used to achieve contaminated sediment cleanup is the Great Lakes Legacy Act program. It's a cost-sharing program for which 65% federal and 35% non-federal contributions are made in order to achieve contaminated sediment cleanup goals. As part of the unique part about this project is that there is a major non-federal partner contribution in order to achieve all of the remaining contaminated sediment within the Milwaukee estuary area of concern. Generally, these projects are done in a piecemeal fashion, meaning you go in, you put together a project agreement with EPA and a non-federal sponsor to address a certain area that needs to be remediated. The unique approach for this project is to address all of the remaining contaminated sediment within the Milwaukee estuary of concern. And to do that, you need a lot of partners and a lot of non-federal partner contributions. The 5 non-federal sponsor contributions include the City of Milwaukee and Port Milwaukee, Milwaukee County Parks, Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District, and We Energies. And all of these non-federal sponsors are all providing funding necessary to achieve that 35% match as part of the cost-sharing program for the Great Lakes Legacy Act. And as part of one of the goals to address the remaining contaminated sediment within the Milwaukee estuary area of concern is a goal to address the remaining areas of concern within the Great Lakes Basin by 2030. As part of the bipartisan infrastructure law that invested an additional $1 billion to address remaining areas of concern throughout the Great Lakes Basin was a news release that was done in October of 2023, which signified this partnership between EPA and its non-federal sponsors for an investment of an estimated $450 million to address the remaining contaminated sediment within the Milwaukee estuary area of concern. And so why now? We talked a little bit about the non-federal and federal sponsor agreements and the cost sharing as part of the Great Lakes Legacy Act program. I think for the purposes of this project, looking at the broader approach of addressing all of this work done at once to make it more efficient in terms of temporary environmental impacts, time and cost, and to minimize disruptions to residents and river users, as well as the increase in federal funding that we had talked about, an annual increase in the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative appropriations, as well as the additional $1 billion as part of the infrastructure bill, and ultimately wanting to be able to work as part of this larger partnership to address the remaining contaminated sediment at one time and to not take a much longer traditional project by project approach.
Hello, my name is Heather Williams from the U.S. EPA Great Lakes National Program Office. Today I will be talking about contamination in Milwaukee's waterways and what is being done toward cleaning up the Milwaukee estuary area of concern. Milwaukee is a city built on heavy industry. Unfortunately, the waterways of Milwaukee became the sewer for much of the area industry. Addressing the contaminated sediment and floodplain material along the Milwaukee River is the goal of the Great Lakes Legacy Act project. When we say contamination is present, what does that mean? There exists a range of contaminants in Milwaukee that have a variety of potential health impacts. In Milwaukee, we typically see PCBs, or polychlorinated biphenyls. We see PAHs, or polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and a variety of metals, including chromium, lead, and mercury. That's quite a mouthful of chemistry, so please take a moment to look at the details on this slide for more information about these compounds. The cleanup project is truly massive. The Milwaukee Estuary Area of Concern has contaminated sediment in all of the project areas on this map, along the Milwaukee, Menominee, and Kinnickinnic rivers, as well as industrial canals and slips, and in the inner and outer harbor areas. The Great Lakes Legacy Act project will address all remaining contaminated sediment through a combination of dredging or removal, plus capping and covering material that is not able to be removed. Key to the project is the development of a Dredge Material Management Facility, or DMMF, which will be constructed adjacent to the existing Combined Disposal Facility. The DMMF will be located along Lake Michigan and is depicted as the black box in the lower right-hand corner of the slide, identified as DMMF. Contaminated sediment and contaminated floodplain material will be removed from the Milwaukee waterways and placed in the Dredge Material Management Facility. The DMMF will provide secure containment for sediment and floodplain soils. It is estimated that construction will be initiated in 2024 and will be completed in 2026. Today, we would like to discuss the evaluation of alternatives, or the potential options for cleaning up the floodplain areas in the Greenway along the Milwaukee River. This slide of the floodplain reach is turned so that north is to the left. There are 7 floodplain areas from the former Estabrook Dam on the left side to the North Avenue Dam on the right side. The floodplains are low-lying areas near the elevation of the Milwaukee River. The floodplain soils are contaminated, but why are these floodplains contaminated? How did this happen? The Milwaukee River in the area of the Greenway used to look different than it does today, largely because of the North Avenue Dam. The dam created an area that appeared almost as a lake, as is shown in the photo on the left. People would ice skate and play hockey here. There were bathhouses along this stretch of river. Much of these floodplain areas were underwater for about 100 years. Unfortunately, during this time, contamination settled out to the bottom of the river as water would slow down in this ponded area. But when the dam was modified in the 1990s, the river was lowered, and the areas along the river that used to be underwater were then exposed as new land, as you can see in the photograph on the right. That is how we now have contamination at the surface in what is now the floodplain areas along the river. Here is a detailed view of the newly exposed areas of the floodplains along the North Avenue Dam at the time when the dam was first modified in the mid-1990s. As you can see in this next photo, vegetation has taken hold in the last 30 years. However, it largely consists of invasive species and is of lower quality. Here are a few other images further upstream depicting areas that were underwater on the left, which are now floodplain areas along the river on the right. One of the first project tasks after sampling to identify and define the contamination is then to perform an evaluation of the potential cleanup options or alternatives. What can be done to address this contamination? Now, these floodplains are park lands. They are considered treasured areas in the city. They're used by people every day as open space and park land. Much of the floodplain areas are part of the Milwaukee County park system. It is a joy to be able to walk along a river in a larger city like Milwaukee. So understanding this, the project team looked at any and all options for addressing the contamination that is present. We looked at excavating and removing contaminated material. We looked at capping or covering contaminated material. We looked at different types of surface treatment and considered the effectiveness of each of these options. Based on that evaluation, it has been recommended that the preferred alternative is to remove the contamination. In some areas of trees that may provide seeds beneficial to restoration, precision excavation may take place around trees and tree roots in designated areas. The recommended alternative is to remove contaminated material, bring in clean material followed by topsoil, and to restore the floodplains with all native plantings. Restoration options have also been evaluated for each floodplain area and will follow recommendations from the Greenway Ecological Restoration Management Plan. Here is a general timeline for addressing sediment and floodplain material. At the time of our November 2023 meeting, we were in the last phases of the focused feasibility study, or the evaluation phase, and have made considerable progress on the pre-design work. We will be starting the remedial design in 2024. Our cleanup schedule is dependent on the development of the dredge material management facility. We anticipate being able to place material in the facility in 2027. The floodplain area work is planned to be one of the first areas addressed as part of the project. We will continue to update this timeline as the project progresses. Cleaning up the area of concern will result in healthier waterways for the community and for fish and wildlife, as well as providing safer places for families along the riverfront and improving the quality of life for generations to come. For each floodplain, we have developed a poster depicting contamination present and describing the current and future considerations following cleanup and restoration activities. These posters are also available as a set of slides that are posted on the Milwaukee Waterway Restoration Partnership website.
Hi everyone, my name is Amanda and I serve as a health educator with the Wisconsin Department of Health Services, which is your state public health department. We've heard a lot so far about actions that are being taken to protect the health of the floodplains. And I'm here today to talk a little bit about what is being done to protect the health of the people using the floodplains. My group at the DHS focuses on prevention of harmful exposures to toxic substances in the environment. And in that work, we collaborate closely with regulatory cleanup agencies like the DNR and EPA to help ensure that cleanup-related activities are sufficiently protective of human health. One of the ways we do this is by assessing human use of the floodplains. We can't begin to understand what is truly protective of human health unless we have a good understanding of how the floodplains are being used and by whom. So we ask, who is using the floodplains? Are we talking about adults or children? And how are they using the floodplains? Are they digging in the soil, playing in the soil, or simply walking along trails? How often are people using the floodplains in those ways, and for how long each time? The information we gathered from that assessment along with soil sampling data, is plunked into mathematical equations by the toxicologists on my team to determine the level of health risk present for different groups of floodplain users. This process is called human health risk assessment. Human health risk assessment is important because it can help us understand whether certain populations may be at greater risk. It can help us identify additional soil sampling needs. This photo here shows an additional soil sampling location in floodplain 11 that the DHS advocated for. This is where children from a local child care center were spending outdoor playtime routinely. Risk assessment can inform public health recommendations, and it can help inform cleanup levels proposed by the EPA and DNR. So, what have we learned from our human health risk assessment? We have 4 key takeaways. First, we looked at the ways people can be exposed to soil contaminants. We know that people can be exposed if they accidentally swallow them or come in skin contact with them. These are called routes of exposure. We know that eating contaminated fish caught from this segment of the Milwaukee River is the main way that people can be exposed to higher concentrations of floodplain contaminants. This is because certain contaminants can bioaccumulate in the fish. The good news is that our assessment shows that no one is expected to get sick from soil contaminant levels based on the ways people are currently using the floodplains. This means that people can still safely use the floodplains. Now, that being said, it's important to note that this assessment did not consider future use. We must recognize that the ways people use the floodplains may change, and that is another reason why this cleanup is so important, so that people can safely use the environment now and in the future. Finally, everyone should follow fish consumption guidelines and soil safety best practices to minimize exposures to environmental contaminants. Our assessment mainly focuses on floodplain exposures and does not account for exposures to these chemicals that some people may have in their job, their hobby, or other area of their life. It is always best practice to limit your exposure to contaminants wherever possible. My group at the DHS collaborated with the DNR and the Milwaukee Department of Health to create this updated fish consumption advisory. You can find it posted in many locations along the floodplains where people like to fish. You can also find the current advisory online by going to the DNR's website and using their fish advisory query. And finally, here is a caution sign that the DHS created in its role with the Waterway Restoration Partnership. You'll also find this posted in many trail access locations along the floodplains. These signs summarize our tips for enjoying the floodplains safely. We recommend that people clean off soil from shoes, clothes, pets' paws, bikes, kayaks, and other items. The goal here is to leave potentially contaminated soil where you found it. Don't bring it home with you. Wash hands after touching soil, cleaning off soil, and before eating. This is to prevent your hands from bringing contaminants to your mouth and accidentally swallowing them. Follow local fish consumption advice. You can use the QR code to search for the current advisory. And finally, don't forage. Not only is foraging prohibited in Milwaukee County parks, but right now there isn't sufficient scientific information about plant and fungi uptake of floodplain contaminants, so it's best to err on the side of caution and refrain from consuming them. And that is all I have to present today. Thank you for your time. Please remember that the DHS is always here to answer any health-related questions you may have. Please contact us by sending us an email at dhsenv@dhs.wisconsin.gov. Again, that is dhsenv@dhs.wisconsin.gov.
Hello, I'm Natalie Dutek, Milwaukee County Parks Area of Concern Program Supervisor, and I'm here to tell you a little bit more about our enhancements to the Milwaukee River Greenway project. The Greenway Enhancements Project is one of the most exciting and complex habitat restoration efforts we will undertake under the Area of Concern program. The restoration efforts and improvements we are making are specifically for wildlife most impacted by urbanization, habitat loss, and the legacy contamination we have been discussing today. The primary goal is to create habitat that supports healthy, self-sustaining communities of fish and wildlife. Work will take place on 100 acres of upland habitat outside of the floodplain remediation and will occur in 7 greenway parks. 6 of these locations are Milwaukee County parks. And as with our sediment remediation project, this is a multi-partner effort. Looking at our map, you can see Lincoln Park, Kern Park, Pleasant Valley, and Gordon Park, as well as Milwaukee River Parkway and Riverside Park. Milwaukee River Parkway is managed by River Revitalization Foundation, and Riverside Park is managed by the Urban Ecology Center. We also will be conducting restoration in Hubbard Park, which is owned and managed by the Village of Shorewood. The county led efforts to create an ecological restoration and management plan with the input of these key land managers. We also included recommendations from existing plans for the Greenway, as well as partner input. We are currently in the design phase of this project. The county has hired a consultant to take our ecological restoration and management plan and develop those into comprehensive habitat restoration plan sets. In order to develop the ecological restoration and management plan, Milwaukee County Parks Natural Area staff conducted comprehensive habitat assessments throughout the project area. Through this process, they identified issues to address, as well as detailed recommendations on the management activities needed to help restore habitat for wildlife. This also included the identification of 3 primary habitat types: southern mesic forest, floodplain forest, and southern sedge meadow. The Greenway Enhancements Project will be focusing on making improvements to southern mesic forest and floodplain forest habitat types. The Sediment Remediation Project will be making restoration efforts for floodplain forest and southern sedge meadow habitat types. This habitat restoration effort will benefit 578 wildlife species already documented in the Greenway. Our project will be focusing on improvements for 29 species most at risk. And I leave you with an example of just a few of the species we hope to support through this project.